Welcome back to the series. It is time. We have to deal with the wiring. This is the Rover wiring harness, and what we're going to do in this video is we are going to strip everything we don't need from this harness and just leave the few things that we need. If you were to leave this harness as it is, intact, your swap would still work pretty much. It's just that you'd have a bunch of wires and connectors all over the place that don't serve a purpose. All right, let's get into it. So these are the ECU plugs. We're not going to mess with those at all. This is the firewall grommet. There's a big bulkhead plug. We're going to keep that. Any ground wires, we're going to keep all the ground wires. Over here, we have our first big branch. And this is where the wiring harness branches on two sides of the motor. So let's go with that back branch first. So we've got a plug that is probably related to the coils. We've got 4 fuel injector plugs. These are square, in my case with a green thing. Every disco might be a little bit different, but you can tell, there's 4 of them. That must be the injectors. We've got some battery cables and starter cables that are tied in to the harness, and we are going to kind of separate that. Over here, this white square plug with 1 wire going to it is the oil pressure sensor plug. We will keep this. We don't need this one. And over here, on my vehicle, there was a coolant temperature sensor on the radiator. So this might be an optional one, but whatever. If I have a place to plug it into, I will keep it. Over here, starter wire, and routed with the starter wires, there's this knock sensor plug. We will get rid of that. We'll obviously keep all the thick battery cables. This is our ignition wire that goes to the starter solenoid, so we need to keep that. Down further, more battery cables, and these are the fuse box plugs. We will keep those. Right, so maybe what I'll do is I'll add some of these yellow labels to anything that I'm keeping, just to be super clear. There, I've labeled them keep. And I've done the same for the grounds bulkhead, just label them keep. So that's pretty much it for this branch. We've gone over everything. So keep the radiator coolant temperature sensor, the oil pressure sensor, ignition, any battery cables will keep any grounds, right? Okay. This orange plug is O2 sensor. We will not be keeping that. Okay, going the other way for this branch, there's another plug that might be coil related. There's our 4 black square injector plugs. Okay, over here, so this branch is a little bit more confusing. Let's follow the branch with the fuel injector plugs. We've got throttle position sensor is a plug that looks like this. It is a 3-wire plug, and the wires going to it appear to be 2 red and 1 green white, something like that. So if you see that, that is your throttle position sensor. We will be keeping the throttle position sensor wires because we need to backfeed them from the LS throttle position sensor. So we will eventually cut the plug and make some solder connections. But for now, just so we know what it is, we'll keep the plug intact. Over here, this black and gray, I think we're vacuum related. You do not need those. Okay. Going down over here, this gray plug, that is your air conditioning compressor. 2 black wires. So AC compressor, we keep that. Nearby, going off the branch with the fuel injectors, there's this black plug that has red and green wires going to it. If you see red and green wires, that is your primary coolant temperature sensor, which plugs into the engine coolant temperature sensor. We must keep this. In my 2004, this is a square black plug that looks very similar to the fuel injector plugs, so be careful. But on most older disco models, this is a round black plug, so it's much easier to recognize. And coming off of that, there's 1 black wire that leads to a knock sensor. We will get rid of that, of course. There's also the Rover MAF sensor. We will not be keeping that. We don't need it. Now let's backtrack a bit where we branched off. And over here, some more wires we don't need. But if you see a plug like this, it's very similar to the throttle position sensor, but it has this plastic rubber sheath around it. That is your crankshaft position sensor plug. It has two black wires and like either pink or orange in the middle. Depending on how faded your wires are, it might look pink or orange. We will use these wires. They will be hooked up to the Golden Rovers box, the electronics box. So we will eventually cut the plug and route the wires wherever we intend to put the box. I recommend putting the Golden Rovers box inside the cab next to the Rover ECU. So what I'll probably do is take the crankshaft position sensor wires and flip them and have them routed back this way, but I don't want to cut them off or anything. Orange plug, that's another O2 sensor, and then this long branch with a gray plug and then another gray plug. Those are the downstream Rover O2 sensors. We don't need those either because we're using GM O2 sensors now. And that's it. That's everything. The rest is just tedious work. It's removing all this electrical tape and corrugated sleeve, carefully cutting the wires, routing them, and eliminating them, capping them off. So I did it. I removed all of the corrugated sleeve and I just left it in a few areas where I know I'm going to cut the whole connector off, so I didn't bother. Get all the tape out. I need to get some tape out of these joints here. And then once everything is loose, then we can start cutting connectors and removing wires. And this will start to get a lot lighter. You gotta remove all the tape that is wrapping these wires so that we can individually cherry pick them out of here all the way to the end. I left this intact, but made sure to unwrap all the wires. So I guess now begins the stripping process. Word of advice: don't throw away anything, just in case I did make a mistake. And let's see. So as a proof of concept, I will start with this knock sensor. Cut the knock sensor wire and set that aside and just start pulling it through. All right, let's keep going. So we can definitely take care of all the fuel injector wires. That would make a big difference. We would make a lot of progress that way. So let's try, this brown one first. Okay, so cut that wire, and then I'm gonna route it back through. Looks like a bunch of fuel injector wires are all like tied to this central thing. Cut those. Fuel injectors. Yep, so get these brown and orange wires, cut off the fuel injector plugs. Okay, now be careful. These fuel injector wires that are brown and orange or something like that, what are they, like purple and orange maybe? And they have this splice, right? One of those wires goes to the fuse box plugs, goes to the splice, and then goes to the ECU plug. So we're going to have to cut this nest off and splice the two wires back together cleanly. but I'll do that later. I'm just focusing on removing what we don't need for now. I'm going to keep working on these fuel injector plugs. There's this, I'm going to go with this yellow gray now. Put this plug aside. Next to yellow white. Snip it back. Put this in here. Okay, that's all the injector plugs from one of the sides. Now let's do the ones on the other side. That's a bit good. No. 3 more. Let's see. This one. The wire and pull the wire through. 2 more injectors. Where'd they go? Oh, down here. Got this one. And my last one is here. Pull that through. Okay. Yeah, and we just keep doing that for all the connectors that we're not keeping. Just snip one wire at a time and pull it through until everything is gone. Let's work on this gray one. Got one of the wires and pull it through. This is a blue one. Let's see. One. So this last wire I cut from that gray plug actually went to a splice, which that splice, well, we can work on that splice later, so I'm just going to leave that there. These we are keeping, cool temperature sensor and AC. Here's another NOx sensor we are not keeping. I didn't even cut the connector on this one, just pulling it through as is. That's fine too. I'm gonna tackle this one. Cut one wire. And the second wire. That one went to that same splice as previous thing, which goes to somewhere. Maybe those wires will just need to be capped off because they don't use for anything. Okay, this gray plug, which may be ignition related, has 3 wires that are sort of twisted together, and I was able to isolate that all the way up to here. Same with the MAF sensor. It looks like I can sneak the whole thing out without cutting anything. Looks like one of the MAF sensor wires goes back to this bundle. Purple pink, I would say. It might be from this plug, which we also don't need. So maybe what I'll do is start taking this plug apart. Okay, we got an O2 sensor. That's a good one to tackle because we know we can get rid of all of that. Looks like there's a wire going that way, which might be going to other O2 sensors. Maybe they're interconnected somehow. Okay, O2 sensor, let's snip the wires going DC. It's like a thick cable. I went to the O2 sensor. I think it's a cable with individual wires, 2 individual wires inside of it. That's this one pile, and now the O2 sensor plug just has one wire that goes this way, maybe to another O2 sensor, or maybe you have like a common wire or something. Yeah, there's a splice here that goes to all the O2 sensors, all spliced together, right? So let's untangle that. Everything on this branch can go. So we'll do this. Okay. Goodbye to all the oxygen sensors. That's a lot of wires gone. Nice. This can go. Get this green one out of the way. Goes to a splice. Okay, so we'll leave it there. And then this one. A whole bunch more wires from oxygen sensors there, so take them on one by one. Oops. Branch fell. And we got a couple more here on the oxygen sensors. Got white blue, a couple of white blue wires. Pull them together again. These are all keepers down here. I'll I'll let them hang down there. All the stuff I'm keeping can hang down there, so I don't mess with it. Another oxygen sensor. Let's knock this one out too. It's a white orange wire. Goodbye. Cables. Also gone. Okay, found one more connector that needs to go and everything else is keeping. So this one has a green yellow and a thick cable. So green yellow goes to a splice that has been cut on both ends at this point. So I'm going to cut the splice off. This next part easier, just set the wires aside for being capped off. Everything here has a yellow label, so it stays. But we gotta resolve what's going on with this splice. So this purple pink wire coming from the fuse box doesn't go anywhere anymore, so we'll probably want to cap that off on there. This purple orange splice coming out of the fuse box that I said goes to nowhere actually does go to somewhere. So I have another purple orange wire that's coming out of this bulkhead. I believe it goes to a leak detection pump. This used to be part of the oxygen sensor splice. There's a bunch of splices together, and so I've eliminated some of the splices. But now I should reconnect the the purple pink wire coming from the bulkhead to the purple pink wire coming from the fuse box. So solder those together now. So I reviewed the wiring diagram. What this purple pink wire is the leak detection pump that basically detects if you leave your fuel cap off, it'll throw a check engine light. That's basically what it is. This is probably the wire that powers it, coming from the fuse box, going to the gray bulkhead. And some of the other wires were going off to power the oxygen sensors, but we don't need those anymore. So yeah, I'm gonna cut right before the big splice. And now we're gonna splice these back together. I'm gonna solder. You can use crimp connectors or your favorite way of connecting two wires. Just making sure I have enough length. Looks like I do. So I'm gonna go ahead. While my soldering iron is warming up, I'll go ahead and strip. If you're using some heat shrink, very important to slide the heat shrink in before you solder. Otherwise, you'll have to use electrical tape. Twist the individual wire. Now twist. Oh, I should maybe not use these dirty gloves when doing that. No, twisted the strands together. Now I'm putting two twisted strands in a cross, twisting those together like this. Okay, so start heating up the wire. And to make a good solder joint, you want the wire itself to melt the tin. That means the wire is hot enough to melt the tin, and then the tin will flow properly through the strands of wire. The hardest part of this is holding the wire, keeping it from moving. Sometimes putting a little bit of tin on your solder tip helps with thermal transfer. All right, got it. That's my solder joint. Okay, once my solder joint has cooled down, I slip my shrink wrap around it and use a lighter to shrink it on. Okay, while I'm at it, I'm going to do the same for this brown-orange splice that was connecting all of the fuel injector plugs together. So there's two wires, one going to the ECU plugs and one going to the fuse box, and those are the two wires I want to connect together. So I'll cut off the big ugly splice there and then just solder these two together. I think that I want to use a bigger shrink wrap because this is a slightly bigger gauge wire. And what happens sometimes is your solder joint is thicker than the rest of the wire. So you end up with with not being able to put your shrink wrap over it because it's too thick. I don't want that to happen. Okay, I think I'm done with the soldering. By the way, if you're wondering, what about those battery cables that were all tangled up? I was able to separate them after removing all the wire loom. So here's battery to fuse box to starter, and another. Okay, now what I would really like to do is to get rid of all of the wires that are just hanging out off the side here. So we could certainly cut them here and get it done this way, but I think what's going on is there's glue inside of this joint, and the only way to get it out would be to cut the rubber carefully. Yeah, the wires are literally glued in there, which is kind of a pain in the butt, honestly. See that? There's like glue inside here, so all the wires in that grommet are just glued together. Trying to get them to go through is going to be very, very difficult. I'm kind of torn because it would be so easy to just stop here, cut the wires here and cap them off. But it would also be so nice to have more room in this grommet to run more wires back. Well, I see no other way forward. If I want to really clean up this wiring harness, I'm going to need to unglue the wires. I'm going to carefully cut back the rubber that is wrapping around the wires. Very carefully not to cut one of the wires, right? Oh, it looks like the grommet is separate from the rubber piece. Okay, so you can pull back the grommet and the rubber piece that wraps around the wires. That is a separate thing. You see that? So I was able to pull the grommet down this way, and then there's this rubber gluey sleeve around the wire, so I can just take care of that, but keep the grommet for later. Okay, starting to peel back the rubber sleeve. It's glued pretty good. Wow. Done with that. All right, there we go. Now I can start working on passing the loose wires through the grommet. Starting with the biggest ones. That'll free up space. The little wires I'm able to do all at once. Nice. Okay, it still has a connector. I'm gonna snip that connector off so I can pass through the grommet easily. Okay, I think we did it. Got all of my discard pile on the inside side of the grommet. There's just two wires, these two green, one green and one green yellow. They're actually coming from this bulkhead, the gray bulkhead. So those I'm going to have to terminate and cap off maybe somewhere in here, right? I could have them go inside and cap them off there too. Maybe that's a nice idea. Snake those in through the grommet and they're going to get capped off the same location as everything else. That's good. I like that. So now I'm going to take my entire discard pile and just cut everything right there. That's my plan. Boom. All at once. Now it's just a matter of terminating each of these wires so they don't, come into contact with each other and cause a short circuit or something. The way I terminate the wires is I put a little bit of shrink wrap at the ends of it. Some of the wires, are these combined wires. They're like a cable with two wires inside of it. So for those, you want to strip the sheath off of it and terminate each of the individual wires inside there. Okay, so now I'm going to work on terminating all those wires. So I'm going to strip the sheath off of the combined wires. I'm going to try at least using these strippers, but probably the best way to take the sheath off is to cut a line vertically along it and try to peel it off. Okay, just done separating all those combined wires into individual wires. Now I take my shrink wrap, cut it into, I don't know, inch and a half long sections, something like that. To cut my shrink wrap into a little section, I slide it over one of the wires and have it have it stick out from the wire a little bit. Then I take my lighter and shrink it over. And I like to squeeze the tip of it flat. So that's what that looks like, the combined wire. Now, to be extra secure, one thing I like to do is to take an even bigger sleeve and slide that over both combined wires onto the original sheath and shrink that on it. Maybe a heat gun would work better than this slider. Okay, and I'm gonna just keep going with that until every single wire is terminated. Okay, done. I have all of my wires capped off and protected. Now before I seal back the grommet, I want to run the free wires this way. Notably the crankshaft position sensor, I want it to go inside the cab. And the throttle position sensor, you want that to go wherever your LS ECU will be. So if you're going to put the LS ECU inside the cab and have the throttle position sensor wire go this way, I'm going to put the GM ECU in the battery box. So I'm just going to make sure to route my wire that way. So my crankshaft position sensor is right here. Since I want to put the Golden Rovers box inside the vehicle, I'm going to run that back out this way. It is now on the inside of the grommet. This one's the throttle position sensor, which is green, red, red. Try to focus. I'm going to keep it on this side of the grommet because I'm going to route it to the battery box. Whoops, I thought I was done, but I forgot one thing. The math sensor has a, what is this, brown pink or purple pink wire that goes to one of the fuse box plugs. So it's this wire right here going to the fuse box. So I'm actually going to cut it here and cap it off. Okay, now's the time to close everything back up. So I'm actually going to put this rubber thing back on here. And yeah, I'm going to wrap it in some electrical tape. Now, up to you if you want to apply any silicone to the inside of this tube just to seal all the wires tightly. You can just put some maybe on the exterior end of it. Alright, so now what's left to do is we need to re-loom all this wiring and make sure everything is routed where we want it to go in the vehicle. And I almost feel like I want to put this in the vehicle and loom it there, because then I can plug everything in and route it nicely where I want it to go. Okay, so the wiring harness is going back in the way it came out. Start with our crankshaft position. And just grab it from the other side. Definitely helps to pull them through from the other side of it. And I'm going to reseat this grommet. I don't remember how it was routed before, if it was above or under this canister thing. Zooming out a little, you can see what I'm doing. So, throttle position sensor, I want that to make it to the battery box. So that's going to go, I think ideally along here. Maybe following the wires that go to the fuse box, if that's possible. Yeah, that throttle position sensor could maybe go this way. Let's see, where are those fuse box plugs? Tangled up with everything else. Maybe I'll do the fuse box last. So, oil pressure sensor, that's just one wire. I'm gonna do my best to untangle this oil pressure sensor wire. Thankfully, it's just one wire, so that's easy to run it through. Okay. Oil pressure sensor plugs in back here. As you know, that's where we put our Rover oil pressure sensor. Two wires. This is the coolant temperature sensor that goes to the radiator. So it went down here on the passenger side. Air conditioner goes all the way there. That is definitely going to have to branch out and go that way. Coolant temperature sensor is really right here now, so it doesn't need to be very long. Could even shorten the wires for this one because it's not going far. That's mostly it, because all I have dangling here is the coolant temperature sensor for the radiator, which goes down here. The fuse box plugs, and out of the fuse box plugs, there's the ignition wire to the starter. I think I want my fuse box plugs to come back here behind the fuse box and to route like this. Now I want my coolant temperature sensor to tee off with the oil pressure sensor, as well as the AC plug, possibly, because that needs to make it over there. Interestingly, the AC plug has two wires, one going to the ECU, one going to the fuse box. So it's departing in two directions. There's another ground that I don't remember where it was hooked up to, but it just needs to be hooked up to somewhere, some ground. Okay, I'm starting to see through the mess now. I am beginning to believe.
He's beginning to believe.
The only thing that's weird is the AC wires. Everything else checks out. Throttle position sensor, more than long enough to reach the battery box, right? We got oil pressure sensor going that way, this white wire. Plenty of length. Wow, I mean, like, just way too much length, actually. So, coolant temperature sensor, also ridiculously long, considering it just needs to go here. That's fine. The next thing I want is for the air conditioning wire to reach here. And ideally, I want it to route it back there along the firewall. But it kind of wants to tee off from here, where the battery box is. Now the fuse box wires, those seem like way longer than necessary. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I almost want to go look at my stock vehicle and understand why the fuse box wires so freaking long. They're just going from the grommet to the fuse box. Okay, I figured it out. I went to look at my stock vehicle, and what was going on there with the fuse box wires is they would go this way, and there would be this plastic thing where the wires tee off and they would go into the engine and just come out this way. So it would just go like a big loop like that. So this explains why the air conditioning wires are so weird, because it's expecting you to go this way. And then the air conditioning reaches fine that way. And then they want you to have the the fuse box wires go like this for some reason into the fuse box. Weird. Okay, I think I've settled on what I'm going to do here. The AC wires are definitely tight. I think I can fix that by having the wiring harness actually come above the canister, come out this way. That should help with that. And for the AC wire that comes from the fuse box, I'm going to pull it back like this, and that's going to pull the fuse box plug back to here. And so there's all this extra wire, which I think I might just double it up. Let me see if I can show you this in a way that makes sense. Maybe what I want to do is start from the AC and work my way back. So I make sure that that's all good there. Okay, so I'm going to start from the AC side. So the black wire comes from the ECU, and there's just enough length to go, over here the way it's supposed to. And so I'm going to take my loom, I'm gonna start applying that to the wire. Right away, I'm gonna secure the loom to the AC wire with some electrical tape so it doesn't move on me. Maybe I'm gonna add a wrap of electrical tape because my wire keeps popping out in that location. Okay, I've made it to here. Now I'm gonna stop looming the AC wire for a sec, and I'm gonna pay attention to the oil pressure sensor, which is the single wire sensor that goes here. Maybe I'll plug it in. Okay, there it is. And I'm gonna add it to the loom from there. And you will notice, oh, that sensor wire is way longer than it needs to be. But that's okay. What we're gonna do is we're gonna double it up and hide it in the loom. Okay, so right here we basically have a T-junction. We don't want our sensor wire to pop out at this T-junction. So we're going to secure this junction with some tape. Cool. I kind of like the way that's coming along. Now obviously, we don't want this interfering with our intake. Maybe the cable can be clipped back there. Seems pretty good. Oil pressure sensor wire, which we will just like double it up in the loom like that. We also have now our coolant temperature sensor wire, which is much longer than needed. You could of course shorten the wires if you want. Yeah, one thing I can do is have the oil pressure sensor wire double up in this bundle, the one that's going to the fuse box. That would be okay. We're going to tee off from here. I could maybe do the same for the coolant temp sensor wires, which the coolant temp sensor just goes right there. And then maybe just double up the wire and like add it to this bundle. Yeah, that seems. Oil pressure sensor wire is a bit too long, so I double it up and I'm going to send it down the bundle that goes towards the fuse box wires. Coolant temperature sensor, also way too long because it just plugs in right here now. So I'm going to maybe tee off from over here and then double it up in this bundle here. Then I'll figure out what to do with that later. So over here, I'm pretty soon going to have to transition to a bigger loom to fit all these wires. So I'm going to cut maybe here. I'm still going to use a short piece of the skinny loom to get the wires that go to the coolant temperature sensor. One trick is you put one wrap of tape on the cable itself, then you put the loom over it, with the tape coming out of that loom slot, and then you start taping from there. That is how the OEMs do it. Okay, I think I've loomed enough coolant temperature sensor wire, and I'll plug it in. And now we want to, yeah, okay, maybe this loom can fit 5 wires. But we're definitely making a T-junction here. We have a branch to put one loom inside the other, and we just reinforce the whole thing with some tape. Definitely could have left some more of that loom here. Cut it a little too soon. That's okay. Didn't know it could fit 5 wires. That's pretty impressive. Okay, now I might start bundling this thick part. And the thick parts, I'm going to have to double up all of this extra all this extra wire to the fuse box. Still more wire than we need. Maybe it can go this way. Yeah, it can go this way. That's good. Okay, I think I want to secure the loom to these wires here. So, go. Okay, I think this is gonna ride like this along the fender. I've got my fuse box plugs, which I never removed the original loom off of those. Now the looms are merging, and I'm just gonna do what I normally do, which is add some tape and reinforce this junction. They will be routed like that. This ignition wire comes from the fuse box and wants to go to the starter. Now, what's the best direction? I think the best is if it follows the battery and goes this way. So maybe I actually want to pull this wire out. It's loomed in here. Maybe I want it to come out separately, directly from the fuse box. I think I just want it to exit kind of like this. That would be perfect. So yeah, something like that. What I like to see. Even better. Even better. Even better. Go behind it like that. That's it. Okay, I've loomed the throttle position sensors wires, and I'm just going to lay them here where the battery goes, so that's where I want them to end up. I've got the super skinny wire loom, and I'm going to use that for the radiator temperature sensor going that way. Okay, and we've loomed the radiator temperature sensor wire, and we just need to finish off this area. This long. Cool. Huh, that's not bad. I like that. All right, well, I think I've loomed everything I could except for this ignition wire. I might loom it together with the battery cable that goes to the starter. So I might leave that for another video. Now I'll walk you through the final results. Air conditioning wire goes to here. Oil pressure sensor tees off of there. We've got the coolant temperature sensor teeing off down there. All of the wires come in here and go to the ECU. From the ECU we have a T here. That is where all of our fuse box wires, etc., and TPS and radiator temperature sensor, they go through here. Right? Fuse box plugs go here. we've got the starter ignition wire going down there, and then throttle position sensor going to the battery box where our LS ECU will be, and the radiator temperature sensor goes down there. And there's a ground that we have to attach to the body of the vehicle. That's all. So that's a wrap for this video. We've taken care of the Rover side of the wiring, and in a future video we'll make sure everything's plugged in and we'll install the LS wiring harness and finish up the wiring. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.